Those of you who still believe in an ancient civilization such as Atlantis, an advanced, sophisticated civilization that existed before the dawn of time, that we keep pushing back, before a cataclysm seems to have wiped it out or mostly wiped it out. I want to respectfully direct this at you in the wake of the Graham Hancock Flint Dibble debate. Talk a bit about that, and then pose three issues that I think make the existence of Atlantis or a civilization like that nearly impossible. Influence, metal, and vegetables, as I'll get to in a moment. One thing that Graham Hancock stated, I think that sounds better than admitted to, he stated that there is no physical evidence for Atlantis. And that's true. But I think what Flint Dibble did a pretty good job of doing is showing all the lack of stuff that should be there if Atlantis was anything like Graham Hancock said that it was, and people who have similar ideas. That seems to be the heavy majority of Atlantis theoreticians, or whatever we would call them, proponents. And many of the discussions that I've seen this week have centered around idea there's that nowhere near enough evidence has been collected to really make serious conclusions about things, such as Paleolithic and Mesolithic artifacts, sites, a small fraction, something of an nth of whatever of a percent in human remains or what have you, have been found nowhere near enough to really draw strong conclusions about anything. Same thing with ice core samples with air and what that's going to tell us about whether or not there was metal technology at the time. And so nowhere near enough, not a fraction of an nth of a percent, to jump to conclusions. You're all jumping to conclusions. However, it is universally agreed upon, it seems now, or near universally agreed upon, that there is no actual physical evidence. Yeah, I'm glad that there's a general understanding of that now, because there seemed to be quite a bit of confusion about that like 3 or 4 months ago when I was engaging these discussions. So why we can be relatively sure that Atlantis is nearly impossible, and what's wrong with some of this reasoning. So as far as the Mesolithic stuff that we do have, when Atlantis would have been around, the stuff that we actually do have, and there's quite a bit of it. Yes, it represents a tiny fraction of whatever, but there are artifacts, there are settlements or little places where people were staying that we can tell a great deal from. Small fraction of percent, but what has been discovered from places all around the world tells a relatively similar story, a similar level of technology that was being used. And nowadays, so much can be extracted out of so little, like human remains with DNA, the advancements that have been made there. Flint Dibble, one of the reasons why that debate was so good on Joe Rogan, I thought, I learned a great deal about methodology in archaeology today, and imaging and the use of lasers and what have you. But a great deal can be told, and from all that has been found, that's what we see. We see a similar level of technology, people engaging with the ocean in similar ways at a similar level of technology. Don't see really any evidence of boats. Some interesting stuff. In fact, Neanderthals seem to have had some carved out logs and what have you, but hopefully you get the idea. But not only that, there's no influence of this advanced, sophisticated civilization, and there certainly would be. There certainly would be. We see all throughout history, you cannot stop the spread of technology. You just can't do it. People imitate, or they buy it, somehow get their hands on whatever the new thing is, or hire craftsmen, and whatever the case may be, technology spreads. And there's, how would it be the case that a civilization that spanned the globe, had places here, there, and everywhere, would have left so little trace, not only physically, but of any influence it had on the other people at the time? It just never works that way. It's never worked that way throughout history. You cannot keep technology isolated. Second issue is metal. So again, we have heard this. There's just been such a ridiculously small amount of study done on this, looking for these trace particles in the air. Okay, but what has been done, and some of these go back a couple of 100,000 years. So we're talking this would, I don't know what the theories are about when Atlantis began. I think somewhat crazy, like 1,000,000 years ago or whatever, but long time ago. Long time ago. And there's no evidence anywhere of this metal smelting during that period of time anywhere on Earth. And they would have been all over Earth. They would have been here, there, and everywhere, right? They're a nautical empire. Hancock has said it was about the size of the British Empire on a couple of occasions. It would have showed up somewhere, and it hasn't, aside from no metal artifacts or anything like that. Hancock's explanation for that is, well, they didn't do that because they chose not to. Like, give me a break. They preferred to have stone plows. They preferred that, and that's just not how things work. I mean, back to this technology thing. If you have something that's going to give people an edge, such as copper and bronze plows, which are going to have a heck of a whole lot of advantages over stone plows for their farms, they're going to do it, because why not? So that's just silly. Or let's say there was some religious injunction in the civilization of Atlantia against use of metal, something like the Bene Gesserits in Dune. Some group of people would find some scriptures, words to get around it somehow. That's just how humans work. There's just no way. It's just silly. And again, some of these arguments are kind of working at it in the wrong direction. Okay, even if the info that we do have represents a tiny fraction of a tiny percent of what's out there, still we're seeing nothing. And we're seeing nothing that would indicate the existence of the civilization. And even from this small amount of data, there are certain things that we necessarily would see. Same goes to metals. Final nail in the coffin, and this is an absolute nail in the coffin. There is no transfer of vegetation from the eastern to the western hemisphere during that period of time. And there's no why. I mean, there's no explanation for that at all. When Columbus hit the Caribbean, within a couple decades, there was huge vegetation transfer. From the west to the east, they were making, I mean, they developed, evolved, whatever. They're great farmers. Sweet potatoes, coffee, things like this. Now, I don't want to get off topic. There does seem to be some interesting evidence that Polynesians had come to South America, had hit that point previously, because they had sweet potatoes prior to Columbus. Some European colonialists noticed that about them, and perhaps even some Native American DNA that worked its way. So they brought some people back, perhaps, but not much. So why didn't that happen? There's no logical reason you can come up with why this nautical civilization advanced would not have, brought the yummy foods from one hemisphere to the people in the next, and then vice versa, and then allowed them to grow these yummy foods, integrating the economies and all that. Why wasn't that done? There's just no explanation. There's no reasonable explanation for that at all. So if anyone happens to hear this and wants to address those three issues, please do. But I think this really is case closed if we're going to be serious about it. And so if you want to dispute that, one question that I would have to those of you who are continuing down this path, you're not giving up on the hope of Atlantis, is what could be discovered? Like, how could your view be falsified theoretically? What would have to happen theoretically, I'm not saying it will, that would make you say, okay, I made a mistake. It seems as though there really was no Atlantis. If anyone would like to tackle that question.